All right, so let's talk a little bit about Ankalaev versus Blachowicz. And if you didn't see my preview video I did on this fight before, here's a few clips on how I saw this fight going. So while it might be an easy narrative to paint the picture that Jan is just going to get countered and hit from the outside, that's not true. You know, if Jan can start landing his own strikes and his own combinations and starting to set the pace himself, he could very well take the lead in the striking here and fluster Ankalaev. Another thing that Jan is really good at is going high to low. You know, he'll mix it up. He has really hard leg kicks. And we saw in the fight with Ozdemir when Ankalaev started getting hit by leg kicks, he started shooting takedowns. Now that tendency to start shooting takedowns if he's eating some nasty leg kicks can work to his advantage. And I think that's where Ankalaev's biggest advantage is in this fight, and that's in the wrestling. We've seen Jan end up in some bad places before with the wrestling, specifically against Rakic and Glover Teixeira. He's been in positions before where his opponents are able to get takedowns and hold him there. And if he can't get back up, you know, he's very likely to lose the entire round because of it. You know, it's tough for him to get back up when he's taken down by a good grappler who can hold him there. Now, Jan does have a really good guard and he has submission wins on his record, but if he can't get that guard going, he's most likely stuck there for the rest of the round. So this fight in general, not the most exciting fight to watch, not the most spectator friendly, and I think the UFC punished both of these guys for that, which I'll talk about later. But there were some technical moments in this fight that were genius by both the guys, and one thing I want to point out here again is that Jan's striking is just underrated. It's not really flashy, there's not a lot of style points to it, there's not a lot of flair to it, but Jan is good at hunting down weaknesses in the other guy and finding a way to start pulling away in the striking or landing shots when other people think that he may not. You know, one thing that you heard by the commentary early on in this fight is that there was a big hand speed difference, and that was true. Ankalaev did have the speed advantage, but Jan found a way to adapt to that with the leg kicks over time. Jan was really smart to start throwing that low inside calf kick over and over again because it started to stop Ankalaev from coming forward and allowing him to plan on his punches, and it also made takedowns harder. So just by throwing that inside calf kick repeatedly, he was accomplishing numerous things at once, and he knew that he couldn't win on just hand speed alone because Ankalaev had that hand speed advantage. So the boxing was going to be tough, but if he could take out Ankalaev's base and slow him down and prevent him from planting and darting in and out as much as he wanted to, that would start to make the striking a lot more even and shift the advantage towards Jan. As he started to take out Ankalaev's legs, you could see Jan start to land more punches, and he also found a home for a good combination with the left hook to the body and the right straight up top. And that was something that I talked about in the last video too, that Jan is good at kind of hunting down combos over time or adding on to combos. He might throw a 1-2, but then he'll throw a 1-2 with a kick, or he might mix it up next time and throw a 1-2 with a hook, or he might just throw a single shot to the body, and then the next time he throws that shot to the body, he comes back up top. So he's good at building on those weaknesses that he finds, or he's good at building on those openings that he finds with his strikes. In round 2, we saw Ankalaev start to react like he did against Ozdemir when those leg kicks started to add up and he started to feel them. Ankalaev doesn't like that. He'll start shooting. And Ankalaev is different from a lot of Dagestani fighters. As I talked about before, he doesn't go out there with a primary wrestling game plan. He tends to use his wrestling when he has to, or when the opponent wants to wrestle. So in this case, he had to use his wrestling in order to deal with the leg kicks, and that's when we really started to see him shoot. Another plus to Jan's leg kicks was the fact that when he took out Ankalaev's lead leg, Ankalaev wanted to hide that leg from Jan by switching from his southpaw stance to orthodox, which isn't his typical. Ankalaev typically fights out of the southpaw stance, but for this fight, he had to switch to orthodox a lot in order to not get leg kicked over and over again. Now, this accomplished a couple things in the sense that Ankalaev wasn't going to be able to stand in his preferred stance and throw power shots the way he wants to from the angles that he wants to, but it also allowed him to have a better jab because of it. You know, if you switch stances from your typical, your rear hand becomes your lead hand, and that gives your jab some more pop. You know, it makes your jab kind of a power jab. You can really put some oomph into each shot, and you could see that Ankalaev's jab started to become more and more effective as he switched to orthodox. So even though he wasn't in his preferred stance, by switching to orthodox, it gave his jab some more power. But the downside is that his rear hand or his power hand didn't have as much pop behind it, and he wasn't landing it as much. His timing was thrown off, his rhythm was thrown off, having to throw it out of the orthodox stance, you know, with the opposite hand. So by ramping up the jab, Ankalaev had a good response to the leg kicks from Jan, but he still was dealing with those leg kicks. You know, Jan kept kicking the lead leg no matter what stance he was in. He was also mixing it up too. He would go to the calf, and then sometimes he would kick around the knee or the upper thigh, and he was still doing a lot of damage with it. So Ankalaev started to wrestle. Now, because Ankalaev's legs were taking a lot of damage, he couldn't put a lot into the wrestling, and you could see Jan defend a lot of takedowns. I think Ankalaev only landed 2 out of 10 takedowns throughout the whole fight. So Jan actually defended a lot of them. It's just that when Ankalaev did secure them, Jan wasn't able to get up. You know, I spoke before about how if Jan is taken down and he's not able to employ his guard game, which is going to be nearly impossible against these Dagestani wrestlers that have really high level grappling, high level sambo, high level jiu-jitsu, you know, all of the above, it's going to be really hard to employ a guard game against them. So if he can't employ that guard game, he typically gets stuck there and he can lose entire rounds because of it, and that's what we saw in this fight. But anyway, Jan had good takedown defense for a lot of the fight, and he stuffed a lot of the shots. But the problem was that Ankalaev is really good with the upper body clinch. He was pushing Jan up against the fence, he was digging for underhooks, you know, he was grinding his head into him with head position, and he was just making it an exhausting fight overall. And what's different about Ankalaev from a lot of other Dagestani wrestlers is that he has a Greco-Roman wrestling background, which for those of you that don't know, is purely upper body clinching and takedowns. You can't attack the legs in Greco-Roman. It's not like freestyle wrestling where you shoot at the legs. Now, Ankalaev obviously can shoot at the legs, and he hit double legs in this fight, and he's hit double legs in other fights. But by having that Greco-Roman background and that sambo background, which incorporates a lot of judo type throws, a lot of upper body clinching, Ankalaev can go for days in the upper body clinch and not get tired. That's where he wants to be. That's where a lot of his martial arts foundation is at. So when I saw him clinching like that up against the fence with Jan, I was thinking this is going to be really draining to Jan, and this is perfect for Ankalaev. Another advantage to that clinch battle and making it an exhausting fight in the clinch is that both these guys originally trained for a 3-round fight. So it's going to be exhausting for Jan to deal with that going into the championship rounds. And it'll also be tiring for Ankalaev, but again, he has experience with all that upper body clinching over and over again. So if it's going to favor either guy, it's going to favor Ankalaev. And if it's going to tire one guy out faster than the other, it's definitely going to tire out Jan, especially being on the defensive, having to deal with that. And as the fight went on into rounds 4 and 5, you could start to see Jan feel the effects of that. He was slowing down. He wasn't throwing the leg kicks as much. He wasn't throwing combinations with his hands as much, and he just looked like he was kind of wilting over time. And when Ankalaev finally shot the double leg, he didn't even really have to change levels very far. He really just bent over and shot straight forward and caught the legs and took Jan down, and then Jan was just stuck. And from there, that was pretty much the story of the fight. You know, rounds 4 and 5, Jan gets taken down. He can't get back up. And specifically in round 5, when Ankalaev came out at the start of the round, he feinted a takedown, which was a really, really good feint. Number one, he started from the southpaw stance and he switched to orthodox real quick. He stepped into the orthodox stance and shot low on Jan, which allowed him to get really deep on that shot. So when he pulled back from the shot, Jan had no choice but just to sprawl. You know, all this is happening in milliseconds. So all he feels is Ankalaev getting deep on a shot underneath him, and he sprawled. And then once he realized that it was a fake, he came back up, but he panicked, and then he just went down and, you know, basically gave Ankalaev the takedown from there and wasn't able to get back up again. Now, altogether, I thought Ankalaev won the fight. You know, he lost some of those striking rounds for sure, but those grappling rounds were really blowout rounds. You know, that last one especially, I think it was a 10-8, at least in my opinion. But they ruled it a draw, and again, that was kind of a weird decision. It's not like some robbery decision like the Paddy fight, but it was weird in the sense that I thought there was a clear winner there, and even Jan said, you know, give the belt to Ankalaev. And I wonder again, was there some influence on the decision there? And the reason I said I think the UFC punished both of these guys for this fight is because the announcement of that Teixeira Hill fight afterwards at the press conference by Dana really, to me, just came off like he was punishing both of these guys for putting on a fight that wasn't spectator friendly. Because that fight really doesn't make a whole lot of sense otherwise. This really should have been a rematch, or at least have Ankalaev in the next fight, because I thought he won, Jan thought he won. Why wouldn't you have him in that title fight, you know? But to have neither guy in the next title fight and to immediately make it with two other fighters in Teixeira and Hill, to me just seemed like a punishment to both of these guys for putting on a fight that the UFC and Dana White just didn't like. But anyway, respect to Jan in the striking there. Again, I think he's really underrated there, and I think the line was too wide on him with regards to that. I think that the betting line was fair in the sense that if Ankalaev wrestled, Jan wasn't going to be able to do much there, but Jan did defend a lot of takedowns, and that was because of those leg kicks and that damage that he built up. It's just that, you know, over time, Ankalaev grinding over and over and over again, you know, he's eventually going to get that takedown if you don't back him off with, you know, some power shots or something that will make him respect coming in and make him think twice about it. But Jan wasn't able to do that, so Ankalaev just was able to clinch over and over and over again and finally get those takedowns. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this Teixeira Hill Hill fight and what happens to the division as a whole. You know, will they give Ankalaev a title shot after this? Will he get the winner of Teixeira Hill? Or, you know, will they kind of punish him in a way for putting on a fight that they didn't find too pleasing to watch as a spectator and make him fight someone else first? And then there's the question of where does Jan go from here? You know, I think he's still a great fighter, has a lot to offer at the elite level. It's just that, you know, Ankalaev is a bad style matchup for him when it turns into a grappling match. But on the feet, you know, he certainly held his own, and he was winning the fight, and he was certainly on his way to winning the fight if the wrestling didn't come into play, but it did, obviously. So, you know, I think Ankalaev can continue to beat him in that fashion if Jan cannot stop those takedowns if they were to rematch. So with that said, let me know what you guys thought of this fight down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.